many of you may be a little bit tired, so we're just going to get ourselves ready for the last session now, shall we? Alright, before we begin, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Alright, I think everybody is ready. Alright, so for our last session today is R&D, technology and capacity building for climate change mitigation and adaptation. As for this session, we have 4 panelists. As for our first panelist, my apologies for the inconvenience. So as for the last session, once again, I would like to invite our panelists on stage. Our first panelist, Associate Professor Dr. Shanatit Palino, Director of Public Wellbeing Division, Thailand Research Fund. On stage, please. And next, Dr. Witsini Vibun Phon Prasert, Research Fellow of Thailand Development Research Institute. And next, Assistant Professor Dr. Nattapong Patnapong, Faculty of Economics, Thammasat University, Thailand. And our last panelist is Mr. Ukrit Unhalehaka, Chief Product Officer, Recult. And of course, our moderator for this session is a coordinator of SDGs Move Thailand, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chon Bunnat.
Okay, thank you very much, MC, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome you all to the last session of today's conference. The topic is R&D, technology and capacity building for climate change mitigation and adaptation. This session is organized by the Policy Research Center on Green Economy, Faculty of Economics, Thammasat University, and supported by Thailand Research Fund. So today we have 4 distinguished scholars and practitioners, and I really believe that today we're going to see the whole picture related to R&D, technology and capacity building related to climate change. We have practitioners who work with farmers using the real technology. We have 2 prominent scholars that works on these issues, and we have representative from Thailand Research Fund, which is considered as one of the main R&D infrastructure in Thailand. So first of all, I would like to introduce each speaker in a bit of briefly. So let me start by introducing Dr. Shanatit Palino. Dr. Shanatit is an associate professor at Faculty of Engineering, Chulalongkorn University, and she is also a director of Public Wellbeing Division, Thailand Research Fund. Her research interests focus mainly on environmental policy and management, clean technology, eco-efficiency, life cycle assessment, and many other issues related to the climate change. She received her PhD in environmental engineering from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Please give her a big applause and she'll be talking about the issues titled Funding Strategy for Climate Change Research. The next one is Dr. Witsini Vibun Phon Prasert. She is a research fellow at Thailand Development Research Institute, or TDI, whose research focuses on issues in energy and environmental economics, health economics, and public policy. She previously worked as an associate at Analysis Group, Inc., a leading economic consulting firm that provides quantitative economic analysis and expert testimony to law firms, corporations, and government agencies. She received her PhD in economics from Stanford University. And the third speaker is Assistant Professor Dr. Nattapong Pattanapong. He is an Assistant Professor at Faculty of Economics, ธรรมศาสตร์ University, and a research fellow at Policy Research on Green Economy Center or Pro Green. In addition, he has worked as a consultant to various government agencies and organizations such as the World Bank, the ADB, OECD, ILO, and Thailand's NESDB, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Industry. He has published papers in areas of international finance, CG modeling, and Monte Carlo simulation. Also, he has published papers in area of applications of remote sensing data, and he earned his bachelor degree in engineering, and then he is awarded the Royal Thai Government Scholarship, and then a PhD in regional economics from Cornell University. And the last but not least, our practitioner of today, คุณอุกฤษ อุณหเลขกะ He is the co-founder and CEO of Recult, a venture-backed social enterprise that leverage machine learning and satellite imagery to help farmers in Thailand and Pakistan increase farm productivity and access affordable loan, helping lift them out of poverty. Recult has been named the best social enterprise in Southeast Asia and Oceania in the global social venture competition and won the FinTech Disrupt Challenge organized by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and awarded Innovative Agribusiness by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Kunukrit received a joint master degree in engineering and management from MIT, where he was a fellow at MIT Legatum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship. Prior to MIT, he was a consultant at Accenture in the Boston office and software engineering at Cisco in Silicon Valley. Kunukrit. So today's session we're going to organize into three parts. The first part, each speakers will be presenting their presentations, and I will start with Dr. Vitsini and followed by Dr. Nattapong and Kunukrit, and then conclude by Dr. Chanatip. If you feel comfortable standing and presenting, that you can also do that. And then each of you have approximately 15 minutes, and then we're going to come to the Q&A session where I will open the floor to ask questions, and if no one asks, I'm going to ask for everyone. So let's start with Dr. Vitsini Vibut Phonprasert on the topic of low carbon electricity from solar and storage. Please welcome Dr. Vitsini.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and talk about very exciting energy technology that's going to help us fight the climate change. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm talking about solar and storage, but the green technology in energy are not just limited to these two. These are just the ones that are in a trend because the cost has declined rapidly in recent years. So it's the technology that we should keep a close eye on. So why do we have to talk about solar and storage? I'd like to take a quick step back to a big picture. We would like to mitigate greenhouse gas emission. Where does that come from? So usually the power sector is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitting sector. For example, in Thailand, if you look at the statistic of carbon dioxide emissions from energy use, the power generation sector has been number one for a long time. It accounts for about 30% of the total carbon dioxide emissions, followed by the industrial activity and transportation sector. Zooming in a little bit more into the electric power generation, most of carbon dioxide come from natural gas, which is not surprising because our electricity, more than 60% of our electricity is generated from natural gas. follow natural gas is the emissions from coal-fired power plant. However, if you look at individual field in the chart at the bottom of the page, you can see that coal, various type of coals, has the highest emission per heat content in million British thermal units, followed by diesel and heating oil, and natural gas come the last. So natural gas is a relatively clean fossil fuel. It has about half of emissions of coal. Compare that to renewable energy such as wind and solar energy that emit zero emissions from the electricity generation unit. So that's why people have been thinking of renewable energy as new hope to mitigate carbon dioxide from this sector. So what's good about solar PV? First, it offers a low carbon source of electricity. In terms of public benefits, if you produce your own electricity from solar PV, say 1 kilowatt, 1 unit, and use that instead of buying the power from the grid, you can abate about 0.5 kilogram of carbon dioxide in Thailand. And multiplying that with the social cost of carbon, that means you are saving or you are creating the value of about 0.2 to 1 baht per kilowatt of units of electricity you generate from solar PV. And this kind of environmental public benefit is the main rationale why the government has instituted various PV support policy or support policy for renewable in general. Solar PV is an exciting technology because it also creates private benefit. The chart in the bottom show a trend in the cost of electricity from solar PV for residential system. It has declined dramatically in recent years from 17% to about almost 40% in just 4 years. This is the example of residential solar PV, but the trend is the same, even faster for the commercial scale and utility scale PV. That means if you invest in a solar PV on your rooftop, for example, and generate electricity to use in-house, you can make a saving from buying electricity from the grid, as well as some other time you can have a power purchase agreement with other entity or with the government and selling that excess power from solar PV back to them. That together makes solar PV an attractive investment even at a lower government support policy these days. So that's why it's coming along very quickly. Globally, we can see that solar PV capacity installation has spiked up kind of almost exponentially in the past almost 10 years, with China leading the way, and China growth in solar PV has just taken off recently. Okay, so can we rely 100% on solar PV that is clean and emits zero emission? The answer is no, not right now, because solar PV also have limitations. The biggest limitation is that it's considered an intermittent power. Intermittent in the sense that it doesn't always generate power when you need it. There's no sunshine at night, so it cannot generate power at night. That means for the working people like you and me who are out of the house during the day, if you install solar PV on your rooftop, it's going to generate power most at noon and in the afternoon. That power is going to go wasted because you're not home to use that. Instead, when you come back home in the evening, you have to buy electricity from the grid that are generated from coal and natural gas instead. So this is the number one limitation that makes investment in solar PV for some user not very attractive. The second reason is that if you look at the power system as a whole, the bottom chart has two colors, the gray color and the orange color. The gray color is the generation from traditional power plants such as coal and natural gas. And the orange one is a solar. So the sum of the two areas is the total electricity demand at different hours of the day. So in a system without solar PV, you will have this kind of upper envelope of the chart as the total demand in the system. But once you have more and more solar PV in the system, the electricity generation from traditional power plants, the gray area, is going to have to drop down during the day. That kind of poses some management difficulty for the system operator as well as the power plant operator, because that means in the morning hours when solar power generation ramps up, you have to turn down your power plant down to a minimum generation level. On the other hand, in the evening time when solar is starting to fade away, you have to kind of turn up your power plant, your traditional fossil fuel power plant up pretty quickly to serve the evening demands. And the act of turning up and down your fossil fuel power plants frequently and intensely is not good. It increased the emissions rate and sometimes it decreased the fuel efficiency. So this is the main limitation of solar PV when you look at the system as a whole. And that's why it brings us to the discussion of the second technology of energy storage. So in a nutshell, energy storage is an energy management technology that will make the electricity grid function in a much more efficient way, because the energy doesn't have to be produced at the same time as it is needed anymore. You can store electricity that are produced during low demand period, or electricity that are produced from excess renewable supply to be used later on, and that can significantly reduce the cost of the power grid and solve the problem of renewable intermittency. Okay, various type of energy storage technology is available in the market. We heard about batteries, we heard about compressed air energy storage, pump hydro storage, hydrogen storage, but broadly there are two major properties that kind of determine the use of various energy storage technology, and that's the first one is the energy capacity, which tells you how much energy can an energy storage hold. If you think of a water bottle, energy or capacity of a storage is the size of the bottle. It tells you how much water it can hold. The second important property is power, which tells you how fast energy storage can charge and discharge a particular amount of energy. Looking back to the water bottle, that's kind of the size of the bottle opening. The larger opening means you can empty the whole bottle in a very, very short period of time. So various energy storage technology lies on a broad spectrum of these capacity and power or discharge time. For example, pump hydro storage, which is the most familiar form of energy storage, shipping of dams, various dams in the country. Those is huge. It can hold a lot of energy, but the amount of energy released at a particular point in time might be slow, so it takes days for it to kind of drain all the energy. On the other hand, the other side of the spectrum is the energy storage with quick discharge time, usually come with low to moderate size or capacity. These are like capacitors and flywheels. And lastly, you see the blue dot, not the blue circle of battery. It spans a very wide range of discharge time and capacity. This is because the battery is electrochemical kind of energy storage, so it has a very broad range of technology depending on the combination of the anode, cathode, and the electrolyte. So it has a very wide range of property that makes it suitable for various application within the electric power system. Okay, so how can energy storage improve the life of a solar PV? I show you, this is the same graph from before. Without energy storage, your electricity from PV go wasted during the day. But with the energy storage, you can store this excess electricity to be used at night or whenever you need it. So that makes the economics of investing in a solar PV much better. On a system as a whole, we show this graph before. I forgot to mention that this graph is actually called the duck curve because you see the line when the solar PV generation in the system increase, the generation from traditional power plants start to kind of decline during the day. That makes the graph that looks like a duck kind of bottom. Okay, That duck curve poses problem for system operator as well as the traditional power plant. If we have more energy system in the electric grid, we can use energy storage to store power from the solar PV during the day. That's the green area in the chart. And shift that power, release that at night time in the red area. That will make the generation curve for traditional power plant flatter, and that's better for their operation, reducing emissions as well as improving energy efficiency. So, looking around the globe, as I said before, pump hydro storage is kind of the most popular, the most well-known technology for energy storage. Also in recent years, we see that red area starting to expand. Also the yellow area. The red area is the thermal storage. Most common form of thermal storage is the the molten salt, where you concentrated solar energy or the heat power during the day to melt the salt and store that as the heat energy to generate electricity later on. The green area is electrochemical, which is what I mentioned as various types of batteries. Okay. How about the current state of solar power and energy storage in Thailand? So Thailand used to be, we are always proud that we are the leader of renewable energy in the ASEAN region. In terms of solar power, we have been seeing a rapid expansion in the capacity of solar power since 2011. From various government support policy, mostly the adder scheme where the government buy electricity from solar farm at a very high premium, as well as the feed-in tariff scheme for both solar farm and the solar rooftop. So as of end of 2017, we have about 2,600 kilowatt of solar power capacity. That's an impressive growth, but at the same time, the scale is kind of still small if you compare it to a big solar market. For example, California has 1,200 megawatt or something, and entirely different scales. So we are a growing solar market, and there are much more solar potential to be harnessed. In terms of energy storage in Thailand, most are demonstration and a pilot project commissioned by or planned by the Electricity Generation Authority of Thailand. I list 3 examples of the pilot projects. So the main reason that energy storage hasn't taken off in Thailand yet is, number one reason is the energy cost. So energy storage is still expensive. When I say expensive, it's mostly applicable to the battery technology, say lithium ion. We already have dams in the country, and that's a lot of potential to be stored, but one limitation of the dam is that it cannot be expanded. It's just limited to the geographic locations that already exist. Okay, I think that's all for my part.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Visini. She actually gave us the picture of the importance of energy use and its contribution to climate change, and how solar energy can be the game changer in combating greenhouse emission and climate change. And we also learned a lot about solar energy production that can be participated by public and private sector, and with the good policy environment, it can be an attractive investment. But its intermittencies is the limitation, so that's why we need the energy storage technology to manage it. And then she also showed us how energy storage improve economic of solar PV, and share with us the current state of solar power in Thailand and some pilot project. I think we're going to have some follow questions after everyone presented. If you have questions, please note down in the paper in front of you, and when we have Q&A, you can ask questions to each of the presenters. Let me move on to the next presenter. The next presenter is Assistant Professor Dr. Nattapong Pattanapong. He will be presenting Big Data and Climate Change. Please give a big applause to อาจารย์ณัฐพงศ์
Thank you very much. May I stand? Okay, maybe this is more convenience. This is the second time that I'm here in this room on this stage. Did you know the first time? My wedding. So let me refresh my memories. So this is the work that I have been doing with TGO. So I have this opportunity to thank TGO to support me for 7 years to continue my study, and also some part was financially supported by Tariff Thailand Research Fund. That is actually the combinations of this study. So let me start. First, the overview. Second one is the methodology to evaluate the impact of the climate change, particularly in the field of economics. Last one is the applications, and actually is one of the main topic of this presentations is the application of the satellite data. How can we use the satellite data to incorporate or to help us to predict and evaluate the impact of the climate change? So let me start with the overview. So this is actually my work with TGO 2 years ago. We try to estimate the impact of the climate change, and we want to do in the more specific methodology, so not the overview that we try to maybe see the regression or try to link the carbon dioxide emission and the GDP, but we want to look into a detail of specific sectors, and actually we did 4 areas. The first one is the crop yields or the agriculture. The second one is the tourism. The third one is the industrial production, and the last one is the health. So we did like the 3-step analysis. The first one is the result from the climate model. The second step is one of the most important part because we have to connect the climate data with the economic model. So the middle one is like the main connectors that translate the result from the climate data, like the rainfall, temperatures, moisture, to the specific informations, and then we translate that information into economic impacts. Okay, so each part is composed of 3 components. So this is the detail of the connections or the analysis. First one, we have the climate model. In the climate model, the main input is the intensity of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So it's the unit of part per millions. So it's the intensity of the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and then the model will generate the temperature, the rainfalls, and other climate data, and that will be connected to the second step. And the second step will use the output from the first one as the input, and it will show the effects on the crop yields of the rice, cassava, sugarcane, and the maize in Thailand. And then the last step is to use those data, okay, to calculate the impact in the economic indicators like the GDP employments or others main index like the household consumptions. And the second one also, we still use the same techniques. We have the data from the climate model, and yes, we have the last step, which is the economic models. The one in the middle is the critical part. We try to translate or try to see the impact of the temperature and rainfall on the number of the tourists in Thailand. So in the second model, we try to compute this relationship and this impact. The third model as well, we try to translate the temperature and rainfall into the industrial production. So we constructed the equations and the econometrical methodologies to calculate the impact from the climate on the productivity of the industrial production, and then we can use this data to compute the impact on the economies. And the last one is the impact of the climate change on the health. And honestly, in this part, I use the result from WHO, the World Health Organization. So most of the calculation already computed, right, by the WHO. So I use the result from WHO with some data from the Ministry of Public Health of Thailand, and then we calculate the result on the Thai economies. Okay, so let's look at the overview of the calculations. I think the first one is the model that has been constructed by many institutions. So in the case of Thailand, Chulalongkorn University has constructed the climate model. So there's the projections of the climate data in the futures, and it's the geographical data, so we can map the temperatures, the number of the hot days, the number of the cold days, and the number of the rainfall on particular area of Thailand. Okay, so this is the example of the result of these projections. And then there's the next one, which is the economic model. We have the CGE model. Is in technical terms, CGE is the computable general equilibrium model, so it's replicate the structure of the economies. And this model can replicate the circulation within the economies. And in this project, we build the models and we test the model and we show that the model can replicate the economies. The errors of the prediction is less than 10%. Okay, mostly the main indicator is less than 5% of the errors. So we use this model to evaluate the impact on the economies. Okay, so let's see the main part of the projection. I think the middle part of the projection is the most important one. So in the case of the agriculture, we use the result from the study that conducted by the experts, and also this project was funded by Tariff as well. And this study showed the impact of the climate change on the crops of the major agricultural products in Thailand. So we use that results and put that result into the economics model, and then we can calculate the overall impact on the economies from the climate change. Okay, that is the results from the agriculture. The second one is the impact of the climate change on tourism. We did our calculations based on historical data. We have the historical data of the rainfall and temperatures, and we try to see the relationship between temperatures, rainfall, and the number of the tourists, and we come up with results that show the impact or the change of temperature that can lower the number of the tourists. And then that is the main input for our models. And we have the details of the expenditure of the tourists, okay, in Thai economy, how much they spend on accommodation, transportation, food, and other expense. So that is the detail for our calculation, and we can estimate the impact on the economies. So in this case, we can estimate how much the GDP will decrease from the increase of the temperature through the tourism industries. For the industrial production, yes, we did the empirical study and we found this relationship. Okay, the higher temperatures can lower the productivities of the industrial production. So this is the key finding that we use in our calculations. You see a clear negative relationship. So from this one, we can calculate the impact of the climate change on the productivities of each industry. So this is the list of the industry that will be affected by the increasing temperatures. And that from that data, we can calculate the total economic impact, okay, through the change of the temperatures and the change of the industrial productions. The last one is the calculations on the health. And like I mentioned earlier, actually WHO has done a lot of work on this one. So this is the work or the main reference that I use in my calculations. Okay. These are three studies that WHO has conducted, and all of this study includes a lot of details of the calculations. Okay, and in WHO analysis, they use the assumption from many models, many climate models, and it shows the projection of the increase of temperatures, increase of the number of the hot days, also the increased number of the heavy rains, and also the higher volatilities of the droughts. So from this data, WHO can compute the increased incidence of many diseases. So this is the main diseases that WHO has computed. The first one is malaria, the second one is dengue. So I use these results together with the estimation from the Ministry of Public Health of Thailand that already calculated the economic impact of each disease. Okay, so I circle the details of the economic impact of the malaria and the dengue in Thailand. So both informations allow us to compute the economic impact of the disease that caused by the climate change. And I put this one into the economic models. And inside the economic model, it shows the negative impact on the Thai economy that caused by those higher incidence of the diseases. Okay, and this is the detail of the calculation. It shows the higher loss due to the increasing incidence of malaria and dengue. And that's from these four calculations, finally we can come up with the final calculation, final results. It shows how much the GDP will be decreasing, the number of the jobs, the revenue of the government, the export and imports. So that is the first part of my study that I work with TGOs. The second one is my current study, is the ongoing projects. The main idea of the study is to use the satellite data to evaluate or to monitor the impact of the climate change. Right? So if you go back to the beginning of these studies, initially I used the data from the climate model. It's the projections from the climate models. Now we can use the satellite data, which is the actual one, the actual numbers, and we can put this number into the model, or it will be the initial value for our calculations. So we can obtain this data from NASA. So NASA produced this data, and yes, one of the most important initial value for the calculation is the density of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is the current values. It's the intensity of the carbon dioxide in June last month. The bad news is that it's 410 parts per million. Okay, it's too late for us. Maybe too late for us. It's beyond the turning points or anything that we can control. I think this may be just the short time, but let me show you this one. Okay, we are at the peak and it keeps rising, the density of the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Okay, so now we are in the era of the high intensity of carbon dioxide that this planet ever experienced. Okay, this is the bad news for us. So that is one of the applications that we can obtain the data from NASA. Also, there are a lot of satellite data that are publicly available. So in the case of agriculture, not only the carbon dioxide density in the atmosphere that we can download from NASA, but we can download the crop yields or the density of the crops on the Earth's atmospheres. So this is the one of the index that we can download from the website. Is called Vegetation Index. Okay, but to call this one in technical terms, it's called NDVI. So basically, it's the index that shows the greenness on the Earth's surface. And we can use this index to monitor the crops. Like in the case of Thailand, we can monitor the crop cycle of the rice, or even the damage of the crops from the drought or it's caused by the flood. Okay, but we have to translate the data into the index. In my study, I did 6 steps to translate the raw data from the satellite into this index. And this index can show the rice yield in a particular area of Thailand. This is the example of the rice yield in Yasothon province in the northeast region of Thailand. And my current results has the accuracy of 88%. Okay, I have been doing this for 8 years, and right now the most current outcome can show or can predict the yield of the rice from the satellite with the accuracy of 88%. Okay, this is the comparison between the actual data and the predicted one. Okay, the second area that we can use satellite data to monitor or to predict the effect of the climate change is the health. Okay, yes, we can use the satellite data from the density of the carbon emission from the NASA websites, and we can also use other data from the satellite to predict or to monitor the outbreak of the disease. This one is the ongoing study, and I will submit this result to the medical journal in the next month. I try to monitor the incidence of the malaria in Thailand, and I use two data. The first one is the nighttime light data. It's the data that the satellite monitor at night, and it's collected the density of the light at night in every area on the Earth's surface. That index represents the urban densities. And then the second one is the rainfalls. So actually my colleague from Chulalongkorn University helped me to collect this data and to translate this data. This is the rainfall. Okay, both data also help us to monitor and predict the outbreak of the malaria. And this is the statistical results. We come up with a nice result. Both data can predict the outbreak of the malaria. Okay, and yes, the outbreak of the malaria depends on the climate change, depends on the temperatures as well. So I would like to thank all of you. And if you have any questions, please submit the questions to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anand. This is one of the very insightful technical presentation. But I think one of the essence of the presentation is that we now have the technology and the knowledge to estimate the impact of climate change using economic model and also using the big data of the satellite data. And Janatapong also shows that right now climate change has a lot of impact on many aspects of society, like on agriculture, on health, on tourism. And I think our next presenter will be giving us a more concrete picture of how can we use this kind of technology to help farmers to adapt to the impact of climate change. So I would like to introduce you to the next presenter, Mr. Ukrit Unahalekaka, on the topic of machine learning and satellite imagery for climate change adaptation in agricultural sector. Please give a round of applause to Mr. Ukrit.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Ukrit. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Recount. I think this is a good transition from what Dr. Nanapong has spoken just now about the impact and the problem of how climate change can impact agriculture and farming in Thailand and around the world. So in this talk, I will talk about how can we mitigate the risk and help the farmer cope with this problem. So first of all, I'm pretty sure this is a common situation in your countries as well, in other Southeast Asian countries. But in Thailand, 1/3 of the Thai population are in the agricultural sectors. But unfortunately, they are one of the poorest people in Thailand. And this is not just a local Thai problem, but a global problem affecting most of the developing countries around the world. There are more than 500 million farmers around the world, in Africa, in Asia, and South America. And if you look, and if any of you are in the development economics sectors, 75% of the world poor living under $2 per day are actually farmers. But these farmers are very important. They produce 80% of the food consumed in Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. But according to FAO by the UN, by 2050, there will be a rise in population, and the world will need at least 50% more food to feed the 9 billion people that will inhabit this earth. But the problem from climate change is that with climate change, as Dr. Nanapong has mentioned just now, it decreases the yield of the farmers. So basically, we are facing a situation where the world needs more food, but the climate change is decreasing the yield of each of the farmers. So basically, unless we change how smallholder farmers grow their food, the world is at risk of food security. So my startup is here to help solve this problem So we solve the food security problem, and how do we find a ways to help uplift these farmers out of poverty. So if you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, problem about agriculture cover number 1, 2, 10, 12, and 13, which is climate action, that fit this sustainable goal. So it's almost half of what UN is actually looking for at the moment. So before I started, so now our company is already exists in Pakistan and Thailand. So the reason it's Pakistan is because one of my co-founder I met at MIT was from Pakistan. So we thought that since this is a global problem, why don't we launch this startup in 2 countries at the same time? And if we find a common solution for both Pakistan and Thailand, that means that we can scale to other countries as well. So these are the picture of some of the farmers in Thailand that I went to interview. So the problem of the farmers that we realized across the world are very similar in developing countries. First is lack of access to affordable loans. Second is low productivity, which is also comes from climate change. And another is come from the lack of information of how to grow better. And last is no direct market access. So there are a lot of middlemen in the agricultural value chain. But in this talk, I will focus on the low productivity and how climate change actually impact the farmers. So luckily right now, most of the farmers start to have smartphone now. So they start to change the way that farmers get access to information and data. So if you go to rural Thailand, more and more farmers start to have smartphone. A lot of them use Line and Facebook to talk with their friends. So we thought, oh, this is a good communication tool for us to change how they can farm. So our solution is that, let me give you a case in point. Right now, our farmer in Saraburi, right? So most of the farmers, a lot of farming depends on rainfall and temperature, as mentioned in the previous talks. So what the farmers actually do with raining is that they depend on their experience over the past 5 years to 10 years, because the average age of the farmer in Thailand are around almost 50 years old right now. So they have like 20 years of farming experience. In our case in Saraburi, in the past 10, 20 years, most of the farmers usually sow their corn in around May or June. But due to the climate change, the rainfall pattern has shifted recently, right? So with our technology, we can do a weather forecast for the farmers into a microclimate weather data to the field of the farms. So for example, in this map of around 30 rights of land, the farmers can draw a boundary of their farm. We will use satellite technology to take the NDVI image of their farm to look for problem. And on the left, we also provide real-time weather data that is customized to their field. So right now, in Thailand, most of the farmers get the weather from the national weather channel, but usually it covers like at the province levels, right? They will say that, oh, Lopburi province, 30% of the Lopburi province will rain, but most of the farmers don't know if that 30% will cover the land or not. But in our team, we have a team of climatologists, PhD from MIT, from Stanford. We build our own weather model, and we do a microclimate weather data to the actually farmers' field. So right now, we are among the most accurate precision weather modelers in Thailand at the moment. So using this data, we can provide and tell the farmers when it will rain, what's the temperature, what they should do with the farming. Along with this is this NDVI map. We can tell the farmers that the red color in his field is where the problem is, so that he can go and solve his problem in time. Just by solving this red color in this field, we can increase their productivity by 20 to 30%, which means increasing their income. So another thing that we do is that we actually use weather model to guide the farmer step by step on what they have to do each day on the farm. For example, in this example here, we tell them, oh, step 1 of planting corn, you should sow your seed on June 5th, for example. Instead of them having to make random decisions based on random data, right? We try to use scientific data to guide them. Using our weather model, we can predict the rainfall over the next 3 months. So let's say for corn, right? The corn growth is 120 days. We can make a model and approximate which day, how much amount of rainfall the corn needs, and we can do a modeling for them, and we can tell them exactly when they should sow their seed, so that it will receive enough rainfall to optimize their yield. So, and we provide them everything from when they should sow their seed, what fertilizer they should use, and when they should harvest the crop to match the weather patterns. Because right now, the weather patterns have changed so much due to climate change that it is not predictable anymore. So using our model, we help the farmers make guided decisions. So how does our technology work? So basically, we use NDVI and satellite algorithm to analyze the reflection of the light on the plant leaf to measure the plant health. and we have all this microclimate data that we build in-house, like temperature, humidity, rainfall, sunlight. We can use machine learning to build a tons of model for the farmers from when they should sow their seed, what fertilizer they should use, when they should harvest their crops, what the pricing of the market should be, and we link them to the market, and we also link them to the loan on the finance side as well. So this is more for the bank. So we actually use this data to help the banks analyze the risk score of the farmers' farmland to see which farm is more prone to drought, to rainfall, to different climate risk, and we help the banks come out with a credit score for the farmers to lend out to the farmers. So basically, after all this talk, we are basically an agriculture data company where we analyze satellite imagery and weather data to help farmers farm better, to help credit score make a better lending decision to reduce the default rate, and we also help crop buyers such as factories that buy raw material to better manage their raw material purchasing. And we already got a lot of partners in Thailand at the moment using our data. So these are some of the pictures of the farmers in Strawberry that we went into the field to help them grow. So the interesting thing right now, a real use case is that some of the farmers didn't believe us, so they believe their instinct. So they actually sowed their seed 2 months ago in Strawberry, right? So now it's July, so 2 months ago was May. It turns out that in Strawberry, May and June, they received very little rainfall. But for our farmers who trust us, they actually sowed 2 weeks ago, which hits the rain climate that we predicted. So it's a good example of the farmers that trust us, they received enough rainfall to help them optimize the yield. But the farmers that didn't trust us, they faced a drought issues over the past 2 months. So, and now from the case study we have, over the past year, we already increased the farmers' profit margin by over 50% now. So right now, there is a yield problem. So this is more on the development economic side. So there's a huge yield gap between the farmers in developed and developing countries, right? So in the US, in the New Zealand, they get around 1,800 kilograms of corn per rye. This is for corn. But in developing countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Mexico, Kenya, the yield is at least 3 to 4 times lower. And there's a lot of research in this field that say that geography of the farmer is not a destiny. The reason that farmers have a huge yield gap is because of technology. So if you look at in the US, Australia, or Europe, the farmers are very developed. They use a lot of technology, advanced technology, big data to optimize the farmland. But in Thailand, it is still very local style. It hasn't really changed much over the past 10, 20 years. So that's why there's a huge yield gap, and that's where we try to come in and help them solve this problem. So our goal this year is that we want to increase the profit margin of the farmers by 100% by the end of the year for the farmer that trust our data. And we are a social enterprise, so we actually measure the impact of how our technology actually affect their children's education. If they have more money, would they send their kids to school? Would they afford better healthcare or afford better nutrition? And here are the awards that we received so far. So we won Best Social Enterprise at Bill & Melinda Gates Foundation by the UN, by MIT, and so on. Okay, so what I want to close with is that you have seen, right? Like Uber, Grab have changed how people commute in the big cities, how Instagram, Facebook, Line changed how people talk or communicate with each other. So I want to see how technology can disrupt agriculture, which is a very traditional field and important area for developing countries. So thank you. So here's my email if anyone has any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Given us a picture of how we can use technology to give the farmers a better information, and that's better decision making for them, and how it helps contribute to livelihood of the farmers, health of the credit institutions, and also supply chain management in general. So I think for the first 3 speakers, we have seen R&D and technology in many fields, and we also see some application. I would like to continue our presentation to Associate Professor Chanatip from Thailand Research Fund to see how are we doing in terms of research infrastructure. So the topic will be about funding strategy for climate change research. Please give a round of applause to Dr. Chanatip.
Thank you. I know you listen to the climate champions, and I promise to not keep you for long, just to share with you an overview of what our organizations try to be part tiny part of giving solution to climate change. So Thailand Research Fund. So if I just prepared this for maybe general audience and hope that anyone that not knowing about TRF, you would learn a little bit more that TRF is established for more than 25 years. And very impressive slogan from my impression is we just want to be a catalyst for change. So hope that with our grant or funding strategy, we can change the way we do things in terms of providing solution with a kind of using more innovations through our funding strategy. So TRF, core business or core value of our service is to think globally. So our research strategy and discipline is not limited to any field. So we try to support any field of research and any science that it emerge. So we focus on research management excellence. So we're not particularly doing do research by ourselves. We try to be very neutral and using a platform of research management to facilitate the research outcome. And our ultimate goal is to be part of for change. So this is really important that many people in the past may not believe that research can be utilized and can be support for any change. And it's going to change in the future, we hope. So what do we support? So we support knowledge creation. So not only knowledge, we support activities like conference, workshops, and research network and research center. And also we really encourage that anyone who not knowing about service that TRF would like to create is we would like to create networks, we would like to create exchange program, we would like to empower human capitals. And so as I already highlighted, so we support all disciplines. Research is really demanding not only for science, we want to integrate interdisciplinarily in humanities and social science because our society needs all disciplines and all dimensions. And this is if not many of you familiar with funding infrastructure of Thailand. There's a couple, like you can see that 7 main agencies that give funding to their protocol, but one of the main supporting agencies that all the researchers know about TRF. And very recently, we realized that with we can call it with the public tax that we get a budget is not enough to speed up or to escalate our effort to make change. So we try to shift our strategy toward matching fund. So we try to match with different international agencies like Newton Fund or National Science Foundation from China. This strategy is worked very well recently because with partial funding from TRF, we get 3 or 4 times matching fund from international countries. So this is some of the scheme of our support. But let's focus on what I've been asking to share, particularly to fit with this conference, is to focus on what do we support in terms of climate change research. I was surprised for the first time that I joined TRF, that I learned that more than 15 years that TRF has support research on climate change. Starting from, we try to look around and who is climate change researchers? It seems like we have very limited capacity. So the first 5 years of funding strategy is to produce or to provide or to empower expertise of climate science, climate scientists, climate modeler, and not limited to any field, but we have to provide opportunities that the researcher can have freedom to conduct their own research. But in the last 10 years, we very focused on more and more of research to utilization. So it's become more clear that we have certain amount of group of experts. So we try to emphasize and to empower them more to focus on the area of expertise. So in the past 5 years, we not only support individuals, researchers, we try to support center of excellence so that become more visible and it become more collaborations. So some of the centers that we think that working as a group or working as a team can be more sustainable and bring more co-benefits to our society or to Thailand. So for example, Center for Atmospheric Physics. So it also at the same time, mentoring system is very, very important because we don't have many people working all the time and working last for their own, for their life, or they have to retire. How can we manage for the newcomers to learn more and have mentoring system? So the kind of research center also one of the things that increase visibility, increase expertise, and attract more of delivery for research outcome and impact. So Center for Regional Climate Model, this is one of the things that we found out that not recently that we can see that after we can be able to modeling, but what is the model for? So this is we also ask for and challenge back to our grant recipient that can you think a little bit more of what is the impact from your models and who is going to be your user and what is going to use for what kind of information. This is some of the things that not only provide support in terms of finance, but we want to some kind of being a real catalyst to spark the thinking and to spark the maybe sometimes researcher feel very comfortable in terms of doing research and going focus and narrow. Sometimes they let alone what is the connection between the big pictures of the research outcome. So that is a part of research center. So now recently we also have coming more and more, we have Center for Research Finance, Climate Finance. So we partner with TDRI, and we also support programs, Policy Research Center on Green Economy. So this is, for example, we want to see more of the group of the team of research, and there are themes or key area that we called it research program. So we have multiple program on climate change adaptations and also climate change, for example, on climate change policy and solutions. So now we want to focus primarily towards outcome more to deliver more impact. So this is an ongoing research. So I think I don't want to share in a bit more detail, but I think I just want to give some kind of impressions that we, as a funding agency, we want to explore the area that still not so sure and still uncertain, need discipline methodology. So if that's become clear, we also provide support to, now we call action research. If you have a kind of solutions, but it's not being tested in the field, this, for example, pilot study that also can be available from what we call the products. Let's say that the grant products. Okay, this is some kind of ongoing research. So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shanatip, for giving us the big picture of Thailand Research Fund and also the funding agency in general, and also our focus on the facility that supporting the climate change research and related topics. I think in the very first round of presentation, we have seen a lot of potentials, what have been going on, what has been applied in real life, and what has been doing, and what can be done, what can we do. I would like to continue our next round with a new theme. It's a kind of like a problem of obstacle. I mean, we have seen potentials, but if there is no problem and obstacle, maybe we have seen a lot of change already, but we haven't. But we may have not seen change as much as we expect. So I believe that there must be some kind of a problem and obstacles. So that would be our second theme. So, but before we go into that, we have questions from the floor, and I think it's a bit detailed. So I think I will ask this question first, and then we continue to the problem and obstacle round. This question is directed to Dr. Natapong. The question is, can you elaborate a bit on how do you calculate unemployment and GDP loss in your economic impact from climate change model?
Thank you very much. Yeah, very technical. For agriculture, we can estimate the crop loss, and the crop loss will affect the productions of agriculture, and that agriculture production will affect subsequently employments and the household incomes, and that household income will then lower consumptions. So it will be like the feedback loop, starting from the crop loss to the household income and then consumptions. That's from agriculture. Tourism is, I think, more straightforward. The more rainfall, the higher temperature will lower the number of the tourists. The lower the number of the tourists will lower the expenditures, right? Accommodation, transportation, food, and other expenses. So that will lower the income of the countries. In the case of the industrial production, yeah, it's pretty straightforward as well. It starts from the lower productivity of the firm, right? So it's lower the output, and that lower the income of the economies, right? The last one, yeah, on the health, is the index that used in health economic is called the ALY. Okay, it's disability adjusted life year is the indicator that used in most of the agencies in health economic to evaluate the impact of the disease on the economy. So it's translate the sickness into monetary values. And in my studies, I use the value that already computed by the Ministry of Public Health, and that will be the input to the models. So these are the details of the calculation. But if you want more details, we can discuss later, or you can email me. We can share more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Natapong. For the second round, I would like to start again with Dr. Vitsini. I think since we have a very diverse topic, so I'm going to give like a question to each of you. So I think the question for Dr. Vitsini would be about, you mentioned at the end that there is some reason why solar energy did not take off in Thailand. Perhaps you can share with us more about the challenges, the problems, obstacles of promoting solar energy in Thailand. And I may add another question that is like related to the first one, is that how ambitious can Thailand be related to like renewable energy? Can we become like can we use energy? Can we use renewable energy for our electricity, or we still have to depend on other kinds of energy? Yes, please, Dr. Vishnu. Can you please change back to her presentations?
I'd like to first answer your later question about how ambitious Thailand can be. I think that really depends on the will of the government and the Thai citizen. Honestly, from economic perspective, I'm not even sure if going 100% renewable will be optimal for the economy, as you can see that many of the technology are still expensive. And so, like I said, going 100% solar might be too much for us. The electricity price might have to increase. So the goal is maybe trying to find the optimal mix of renewable energy as well as thermal fossil fuel energy and incorporating new technology to make the fossil fuel even cleaner. So there has been discussion about revising the alternative development energy plan to maybe 40% of renewable power by 2036, and I think that is an optimistic goal, and I think we could have gone higher if we want. Okay, so in terms of obstacle and problems that Thailand has experienced in terms of its renewable energy policy in general, I'd like to kind of separate the issues into three broad issues. The first one is policy uncertainty. Second one is technology cost, and the third one is the rule and regulations that are present in the power market at the moment. Okay, the first one is the policy uncertainty. So Thailand kind of have a stop and go policy for renewable. So if you see the timeline of renewable energy purchase policy at the bottom of the page, we began at around 2007 with various renewable energy purchase scheme, and it opens for limited windows of time that developer can come, hand in the applications, and then the application is closed, the quota is filled, and then you go on to sell electricity afterward. In terms of developer, in the view of developer, they don't really know when the next window of the purchase contract application will open or how much purchase rate will be after each window is closed. So there has been this window opening and close for various period of time in the past 10 years. There has also been a scheme change from an adder kind of power purchase into a feed-in tariff power purchase, and then a switch from a regular feed-in tariff into a feed-in tariff bidding program, and also a mix of the solar farm and solar rooftop power purchase and kind of going around in this timeline with kind of no systematic the developer cannot have a systematic anticipation of when which policy will come. For example, last year, the government was discussing kind of approve in principle about the idea of having a solar rooftop net billing program, which means if you install solar on your roof and it produces excess electricity, then the government can buy it back at a specified price. There has discussion about that at the late 2017, and we have not heard anything more about that scheme until now. Still silent. Furthermore, the Minister of Energy has announced early in 2018 that they have no plan to buy renewable power in the next 5 years. So together, this kind of caused a very confusing signal for developers and investors in terms of renewable energy, and many of them have complained and planned to go out of Thailand and invest elsewhere. That problem of policy uncertainty. And the second one, technology cost, is mostly applied to energy storage technology, battery in particular. I give you an example here of a back of an envelope calculation of using battery with existing solar PV to try to make its output firm, meaning that it will produce and release electricity 24/7. So if we do that with existing solar farm, and we take the projected cost curve of the battery from a very aggressive predicting house, the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, this is a very aggressive cost curve, meaning that it might decline more than other people have anticipated. If we look at that cost curve and calculate when will using solar plus battery can defer the construction of new coal power plants, when will that cost saving outweigh the investment cost of the battery itself? The earliest projection would be 2017, that's for the coal plant. If you use solar plus storage to defer gas plant construction, that can be even further away, like 2023. This is just an example to show that using battery plus solar PV for broader application might not become economical until after 2020. So we will need to have to get the cost decline, especially for battery technology. And the last problem and obstacle that kind of make energy storage as well as renewable grow not as fast as we anticipated is the rule and the regulations of the power sector itself. First, there are limited roles for renewable and energy storage to play in providing other services in the electricity system. For example, you can have backup service, frequency regulation service that usually up until this point the big thermal power plant can provide and they got compensation for it. However, for renewable energy, solar power, wind, or energy storage, there's no compensation system for it. There's no contract that they can make with the electricity generation authority to provide such service. And that kind of limits the investment return on these technology to only self-consumption. The second rule and regulation problem is that there are protocols and the purchase contract in the electric grid that kind of prevent the grid from being more flexible, and that means it cannot accommodate a higher level of renewable energy integration. For example, we have a forward purchase contract with main power plant that kind of go into the power development plan until 2036. That makes it hard to revise the renewable energy goal up. And the last one is the electricity tariff. Basically, every price signal in the electricity market, in the electricity system right now does not really reflect the system cost and the environmental cost associated with using electricity. For example, electricity is, right now, the tariff structure makes it such that electricity is cheap at night. If anyone is on TOU rate, they will know that it's cheap after 10 p.m. at night. But in the future, when we have more and more solar power in the system, you see that the total system demand is going to spike at that time. And demand spike will lead to a very high production cost and associated emissions. If this kind of tariff structure doesn't change, it will not encourage people to install solar PV or add storage to kind of shift the PV production to use in the evening. So this is the current kind of problem and obstacle that I see in the system right now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vishni. I think the time frame of energy development is kind of a long term, like more than 5 years, and that's kind of mismatch with the political system we have right now. Yes. Okay. So that is the challenges, problems, obstacles in terms of like the energy sector. Let me move on to Dr. Natapong. You were talking about the application of big data on how can we calculate and predict the impact of climate change, right? It seems very promising, but can you also share with us some of its limitations? And I think another follow-up question would be about how can we expand the use of this method? Who can use it, and how far can the application of your method goes in terms of informing the policy? Maybe start with the limitations.
Okay.
Yes.
Limitations. We need more techniques, more computational methodology, like Ritkout have done that. We need new techniques to do the calculations. There are more data and more computational powers, but we need more people to work on that. That's the first issue. In specific issue like the climate model or the crop yield models or even economic model, we need to further the accuracies and the capabilities of the models. That is the first issue. The second one is the person who can integrate all of this, the system integrators. I know in Thailand there are a lot of people who are the expert in the climate model, who are the expert in the crop yield model, or even the expert in economic model, but still it's just a limited number of people who can connect all of these three models and let them work together or try to combine them into one piece. So I know TRF is one of the main agencies in Thailand that try to promote this integration or these collaborations. And the next issue is not about only the technicals, but the policy implementations. How can we use both private sector and public sectors to deal with the climate change? Yes, it's the big argument. Some people say that this is the job of the government. Okay, Ministry of Finance has to provide the budget to support people. But also a lot of people think that there might be other mechanisms from the private sectors that can also mitigate the problems. So in the futures, we need more innovations, okay, especially in finance, okay, to mitigate the impact from the climate change. And we see a very excellent example from Ritcal that they introduced a new technology and new financial tools to do this.
Okay, thank you very much for your view on the limitation. So mainly there are not enough people to be able to work on these issues. No? So capacity building may be needed in order to increase the number of people who can work on this method, and then we need to increase like the accuracy and the techniques, right? Okay, and you mentioned in the end about the role of the public and private sector on dealing with climate change and the incorporation of like financial tools in order to like promote the corporations and implementation of how we deal with the climate change and adapt to the situation. Okay, moving on to Kun Ukrit. You are kind of you are social entrepreneur. And now you're working with various sectors. What are the existing challenges and obstacles that you are facing? And can you also share with us like the potential of like expanding or scaling up your work?
Okay, thank you. So I see the problems that we face as an organization have two fronts. First is the model building, and the second is that how do we bring our technology to the hand of the farmers. So to add on what Dr. Natapong has mentioned, that we need more sophisticated machine learning algorithms or different tools and techniques to build a better model. But one of the big problems that I see at a policy level is access to historical data to be used to build our model on. Right? For example, if I want to do a crop yield on like corn or cassava or do different various approximation of risk model, I want access to historical government data of the farmers, but it's almost impossible for a private sector to access the government data, right? So I don't know where I should talk, who I should talk to, or who I should ask for. Sometimes I find a department that I can ask for, but they're not willing to share to a private sector. So I think that's the limited steps that a lot of social enterprise and private sector face in Thailand. Is that because if you look in research paper, there are a lot of new algorithms and technology that come up every day, right? That we can just copy from somewhere else. But the most important thing is to have enough data to train the model to have the predictive capability. The challenge in Thailand is that how do we get access to that data to train our model? I think that's the first challenge that we are trying to get our technology around. And the second piece is that after we have the technology and model, how do we bring it to the hand of the farmers who are usually not so educated, they are pretty old, and they are not. The behavior is different from the users in Bangkok, right? If you use Grab, use Uber, use Facebook, use Line, the behavior of the users in Bangkok, in big cities, are different from the behavior of the people in rural areas. In rural areas, people want large text. They want easy navigation, for example. So in order to succeed in this area, we have to spend a lot of time in the rural area, use design thinking and new startup methodology like Lean and Agile to talk a lot with the customer and change our technology and solution rapidly, which is a challenge that most of the company in Thailand still use a traditional way of developing system, which is don't really talk to customer that much, develop the technology and takes a lot of time before they test with the real customer. But we approach it from different perspective where first we don't have a solution, we go and talk to as many customers as possible, bring MVP in the hand of the farmers and let them complain and comment on us and we change rapidly. So that's how we're mitigating this problem at the moment. But we are still working on it. How do we bring advanced technology into the hand of people who are usually illiterate and usually quite pretty old compared to the average in the capital cities?
Wow, thank you very much. I think it's kind of very brief answer, but very hit to the point. So I think from the first three speakers, I think there are at least 4 problems facing us right now. The first one is like institutional problem, the policies, the rules, the regulations that kind of create uncertainty and somehow not motivating people to change to a more sustainable path. And the second one is about like capacity building. Not enough people have the capacity to work or to develop these kind of technologies. And the third one is access to data. I think not only historical data, I think data in general, I think researchers experiencing the same problem. And the last one is about delivering to the users. So I think there are 4 problems. So I may adjust the question for Dr. Chanathip a little bit because I think you are working with Thailand Research Fund. So if you could have some comments about the problems that the first 3 has mentioned, can you please share that with us? And also, if Thailand Research Fund also have its own limitation, can you also please share with us? Thank you.
I take that as what challenge that we face, right? Okay, so I think everyone that facing the same in common is that many of the things that we done, it's part of it because we still have climate skeptics, right? Even though we have Paris Agreement, but in community like Thailand, they still kind of have ignorance about okay, climate change and so what, right? And then what is going to affect? It's not in my lifetime. This is what we face as a society that whatever we do, we still a very limited niche, even niche in market or niche in a kind of what we call social demands of solutions. So if we want to deliver or produce climate solution, this is what I think what TRF or many agencies is talking about now. We're not talking only about knowledge. We want to talk about what is a problem and what is a solution for that problem. So also at the moment, I think what we conduct as a strategy is we want to support and anything that can expand or reduce the gaps or reduce the limitations. So as a TRF, we saw a lot of gap, and most of the gap is very, very challenged because it's not single organization. It's what we call is interdisciplinary and inter-organization or even inter-ministry. So it's hard, it's challenging, it takes time, but we have to do it. This is the only way. We have to talk more like this, even in a forum or in a close group or in formal or informal. But I think ultimately we want to deliver climate solution. To get to climate solution, sometimes the solution has to test, to try, to make profits. That's why climate finance is a kind of things that now we want more and more of people understand what is finance means to climate solutions. Sometimes climate solution is a pilot, but how can you expand it? How can you make it as business as usual? We talked about health impact on climate change. What is solution? We talked about malaria, we talked about disease, we talked about disaster like what they face in Japan. what are we preparing for right now, and how we going to invest in terms of research, how do we going to invest in terms of society. I think so. So if we see the concept of climate change is going to be part of business as usual, what are we going to do? Is just switch to renewable is enough? Maybe or maybe not, right? How can we take this challenge as an opportunity for innovations? And I really like the name of the conference. We not that we know that climate change is real. We know tentatively we know that we have to address, we have to do a solution, but how can we accelerate, right? Accelerate the action, accelerate our solution. So that comes with the part of, I think it's a keyword in this conference, is how can we accelerate the Paris Agreement implementation through finance, technology, and capacity buildings. So in the past two or 3 years that I work at Tariff, I try to provide more of the support to the research empowerment. So to different what we try to call them different stakeholders. Since a freedom of research, anyone can be a researcher, not in academic institutions, right? We provide, now we want to empower new generations. How can they take roles in terms of climate solution or activities? How can the medias doing their roles on driving climate solutions? This is also our funding support that are ongoing. We hope that we can build more and more groups of people who have methodologies, who have instincts, or who have awareness, so that they all provide their own solutions and take climate change as an opportunities for. This is very I have to be careful when we drive for profit, but actually if we can do climate solution and if we can take climate change as an opportunity for economic growth, how about that? That's kind of thing that I think we all share, but we have to make common understanding. We have to address this, we have to address it quick, and we have to break through all the walls and collaborate and talk more.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the word that maybe describe the challenge of TIF is like the integration, right? Integration between sectors, between organizations, between levels, even integrating climate change into the policies, into the awareness of people in various sectors, and how can that lead to the new innovation and solutions to climate change, and how can those solutions align with economic incentive, right? So I think we have a quite insightful session, both in terms of potentials and also the challenges and obstacles, which will become our new research topics for many of us, and new questions, new challenges for every organization involved in this conference. I think we managed time quite effectively. We're supposed to end around like 5:30, but I think we have a few minutes. If the floor has some questions, you can also raise your hand, and I believe that the staff will deliver the microphone to you. Let us have maybe 2 or 3 questions, please.
Hi, thank you panelists for the comprehensive and impressive presentation. I'm from the Ministry of Commerce, so I have 2 questions if that's okay. First, for Dr. Wisini, there's been a lot of talk in the West about things like microgrid and Uber for energy, especially in the rural area and in a hot climate country such as Thailand. So I was just wondering what's your view on this, and would it be a possibility in Thailand in the next 10-20 years or so? I do know that it comes with its own challenges, but just out of curiosity, since it is your field of research. And Kun Ukrit as well. You mentioned earlier that your pain points of the farmers include their market access, the lack of direct market access, but your app, or because the lack of time, you haven't addressed the issue. So I was wondering if that has been looked into, or if that is the next stage of your app, and if there's any comments for the government side of things. And my apologies for being part of the institutional problems. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we collect all the problems and then everyone respond at once. Do you have any problems? Okay, in the back, the gentleman.
Hello, thank you for the two presenters that touch upon on the agricultural sector. I have two questions for Dr. Nattapong. The first question is, I think your piece of work is very useful for building up the monitoring and evaluation system for climate change and the early warning system as well. But the point is, we never have this kind of analysis embedded in any Ministry of Agriculture. We don't have anything like this. We have something similar like this, but not climate change. My question is, if we need to develop this kind of model or any kind of analysis in the ministry, you mentioned clearly that we need somebody that understands the three main models, crop models, climate model, and the economics model. Who's going to be in charge? Any ministry or any agency that who gonna be in charge to make the early warning system for Thailand? I would like to know your opinion. Who's going to be take action like this? And the second question is for Kun Ukrit. Your presentation is very, very useful for me. And one thing that I compare to my piece of work in my Ministry of Agriculture is AgriMap. We try to make the best use of AgriMap. You might know AgriMap. We use this application to suggest the farmer to make the production plan in their land by the land suitability or anything like a climate suitability. But the thing that we never have, like your application, is how we can connect to the market. And your application is suggests that it's possible to link the farmer production to the market. But I would like to know that if we can scale up your application nationwide, this is a possibility for us to do, for us, let's mean the Ministry of Agriculture, to do like this. Thank you. This is my questions.
Okay, thank you. I think now we have around six questions. So, if there's no one really want to ask questions, is there any other question? Maybe one more person to ask. Okay, so if not, I'm gonna. I think maybe we start with Dr. Visini and followed by Dr. Nattapong, and then Kunakrit can tackle all the three questions. No. Dr. Visini, about the view on Uber for energy. Right? Yes, please.
So I'm not sure I understand your word about Uber on energy. Does that mean I can produce energy and I sell it to you when you need it? Okay, so that's microgrid and peer-to-peer energy trading, if I would like to put it. So I think that that's kind of the new phase of the electricity system that we are progressing towards. With the progress of the IoT system, the energy storage, as well as the renewable energy technology, that will make electricity generation much more distributed, which means electricity is generated close to where it is consumed, and that will make the electricity grid much more efficient because you don't have to invest in transmission line, distribution line. You don't have electricity loss from transmitting it over a long distance. So that's a very, very nice thing to have. However, in terms of the system operator as a whole, a new challenge for them would be processing a tremendous more amount of data because you will have local demand here and there, local generation here and there. How can you coordinate the net import and the net energy import and export between different microgrid so that the entire electricity grid of the country remains stable? How can you manage to have backup energy for various locations in case they have blackout? So that's going to pose a new challenge in terms of data management.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Visini. Let's move on to questions of Dr. Nathapong.
Thank you for your questions. It can be a committees or it can be a working group of the experts. But first, each one has to share the main ideas or the main mechanism of the model or the main mechanism of the progress that they are working on. And in my case, yes, I talk and learn from many experts in their fields to learn about how to do the predictions of the climate. And I also took the class in crop biology. I took a class in biochemistry to learn about the crop models. So I think it's like the opportunity to do this or to integrate the knowledge, but each expert from each field has to get out of their comfort zone and try to learn the other fields and try to get the main idea and learn how to connect the models and to learn the main mechanism of the other fields. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Kunukrit, I think you have 2 questions related to your apps. Thank you.
Okay. So I will answer the market access question first. Then, actually, I just met the Deputy Minister of Commerce last month to talk about this market access issue. So right now we are working a lot with factories in Thailand. Whether it's so first of all, for full disclosure, we are working with cash crop first, like พืชเศรษฐกิจ which are rice, sugarcane, cassava, and all those things. We haven't worked with fruits such as durian, mango, and all the fruits yet because it's different value chain. So we are focusing on cash crop. So what we do is that we work with large agricultural mills that buy raw material like animal feed, corn, which is turned to animal feed, or cassava, which is turned to starch and export to China and so on. What we do for this factory is that we do a yield forecast for them in the province, and we help them approximate when will farmers be ready to harvest the crops, right? So that we can give them a prediction for the factories in purchasing raw material. If they know that next month or in 2 months there will be a supply shortage, they can do a forward contract with supplier in Vietnam or in Cambodia instead to import cassava in rather than do a domestic consumption. So by having all this data, we can know which farmer will be ready to harvest when and when to sell, and they can sell directly to our factories partner who will buy directly from the farmer, skipping the middleman along the process. The reason that we are focusing on cash crop is because for fruits, if we connect them with buyers directly, it's harder because fruits are more perishable. If we do mango, it can get rotten or spoil if we don't ship it within a certain day. So we haven't touched that area yet. So the answer is that we are working with large factory to buy direct from cash crop farmers. And for the fruits or vegetable, we are actually working with WWF, which is also in this room, to help farmers in the northern Thailand grow vegetable and fruits and ship it to a supermarket in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai, but it's in a pilot stage at the moment. So we are working closely on this part to help farmers sell to the buyers. So as for another question, which is about AgriMap, right? So I think AgriMap from the Minister of Agriculture is amazing. So actually they have a tons of data behind that we also try to get in and look at the data to build our model, to be honest. But the problem with the system from the government is that the end users, it is very hard for the end user to use AgriMap themselves because of the amount of data and complexity involved, which is where we come in. So our team is specialized in design thinking and UI UX design. So we try to break down the complex data that the government have. How do we present it in a presentable ways that the end users can use? Which I think this may be a challenge for the government side, because when they write TOR to find a supplier to develop a system for them, it is very hard to put a TOR where you have to develop a system where the user can use easily, right? So I think that's a challenge in the government budgeting. So that's where we can come in and take this gap in the market where we make the system that government already have a lot of data, but how do we make it in a presentable way that end users can use? So I think there are a lot of collaboration opportunity that we can work with the government as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Kunukrit. I think we need to come to a close. Right now it's like 5:40 p.m. But I think we have learned a lot today regarding the R&D, technology and capacity building for climate change, mitigation and adaptation. We have seen, I believe, only a fraction of what is happening right now in society regarding these issues. But we have a very prominent scholars and practitioners to share with us a very deep and in more detail, give us insights into potentials and obstacles and challenges. So I think one of the key message that we need to work on further is how can we make sure that we have capacity building system to increase the number of people who can work on technology and R&D, and how can we hope and change the institutions and governance of in this sector to make sure that all capacity can be unleashed and change society in a way that we can adapt and mitigate with the climate change problems. So on behalf of the organizers at the Policy Research Center on Green Economy from Faculty of Economics, we would like to thank all four presenters. Please give a round of applause to all presenters. Thank you, Dr. Shinatip, Dr. Vishini, Dr. Natapong, and Kunukrit for the presentations and Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists and the moderator as well. Thank you very much. And that is the last panel discussion for today's conference, R&D technology and capacity building for climate change, mitigation and adaptation. Thank you once again to our four panelists, Associate Professor Dr. Shinatip, Dr. Vitsini, Assistant Professor Dr. Natapong, and Mr. Ukrit, and of course our moderator as well, Mr. Shon Bunnak. Alright, now ladies and gentlemen, as for tomorrow, for the registration, will begin at 8:30 a.m. onwards, and as for the first topic, will commence at 9 a.m. with effective approach to transform NDC into actions in Southeast Asia.